Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of Clinic Gym Radio. I'm super excited today because I'm joined by Cass Strunk and Kyle Young from Kabuki Strength. What's up, guys? How are you?
Doing great.
Good. Thanks for having us on. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, I think that some listeners may know about Kabuki. I think you guys are the new, I'm going to say new, but you guys are probably like, we've been building this for 20 years. But the new hot kid in town of you're creating incredible equipment. I mean, just look at the trap bar. You can see like this was designed by people who understand what goes on the gym floor. And you guys are also getting into education. You're getting into coaching. You're providing programs and all sorts of stuff. It's like the newest company that's dealing with old time strength training. So how the heck did you guys get involved with it?
Individually or?
Sure.
Well, I actually just was interested in powerlifting for a really long time. It took me a lot of courage to step into a gym by myself, but I've been in the health and fitness industry since I was in high school. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in kinesiology. I'm a physical therapist assistant. So, full-time clinic work is what I was doing before I joined Kabuki full-time. But I was introduced to Kabuki just doing a simple Google search. Powerlifting gym, Portland, Oregon. They were the first website that popped up, and I'm not going to lie, it took me a year for me to actually step in. It was always just saved on my browser to walk in. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And so one day I finally did, and Chris Duffin and Rudy Cadlub, who are Chris Duffin is the CBO and Rudy Cadlub is the CEO now, but they welcomed me in. And about a week later, Rudy looks over at Chris after I was deadlifting and says, she needs to sign up for the powerlifting meet that's being held here this weekend. And they signed me up. Rudy bought me a singlet. I had no idea what I was doing. And that is how I was introduced to powerlifting. 1 week into the gym, they signed me up and there it goes. And then, through my clinical experience, if anyone listening has been following Chris Duffin for a while, you'll know that his approach to lifting is integrating multiple professionals in the industry, not just powerlifting coaches, but clinicians, from surgeons, chiropractors, LMTs, physical therapists. We have, athletic trainers. We're always wanting to learn from the best and from multiple perspectives. And so, me having some clinical experience, I joked around one day saying, hey, you guys need a female coach. And they all looked at each other and said, wait, are you interested? And then I said, yeah. And then there we go. And now I'm here. So I'm taking a break from full-time clinic work right now. Awesome. And just seeing how I can grow here and help Kabuki grow with a few new projects.
I love it because Chris's approach seems just like pragmatic. Like, can that give me a 2% advantage? It's like, yes, rubbing this magical flower on your left tricep, right after every lift will help you lift 2%. Cool. Give me some flowers. It's like, it doesn't matter. So Kyle, how about you? How did you get involved in Kabuki or with Kabuki?
So, I think Cassie was actually on coaching staff before me, but my time experiencing Kabuki might have been a year or two before her. So I managed gyms, CrossFit gyms, including CrossFit gyms, here in Portland, Oregon for years. Was a personal trainer, actively involved in martial arts, but always had a love for powerlifting. So competed in my first couple events, and I think the first time I heard about Kabuki, we were actually Elite Performance Center at an old location at this point in time, and some of my first athletes that I coached at meets were there. Fast forward years later, I started cross training when we were Elite Performance Center at this location, and that was where I did my meet prep. And then slowly but surely went through one of the very first certifications myself. Was one of the certified coaches, if you will, on the team, but I was always busy on the other side of town running commercial facilities. Finally had enough of that and closed those down prior to pandemic and whatnot, but shifted gears and came on board full-time on the coaching staff here. So I have years of competing, and actually Brandon is my coach. So I've been coached by Kabuki for way longer than I've been a coach or an employee. And the other interesting thing, we're talking about integrating things, how I got to know Chris real well. I was a massage therapist, and before I even really knew him, he reached out needing help one of the times when he couldn't walk. And I came over and started putting it back together. And fast forward into his latest strength feed, I was the guy doing all of his recovery. Well, the soft tissue part, there's multiple people on the team, of course, so not all, but the soft tissue side of things, and actually handling him through his last couple big strength feeds. So
that's awesome. So your basic kid who walked into Disneyland like, this place is awesome. I could totally work here.
Yep.
I'm going to ask for John.
Pretty much.
That's awesome.
Pretty much
Now yeah. I think it's awesome to see this progression because, like, you know, Chris is, for those listening, Chris Duffin, his goal was what, 1,000-pound squat for reps. Am I saying that right?
Correct.
And like, in any sense, for anybody of any anatomy, of any background, of anything, that is a monumental goal. Like, there's no way to undersell that. But I think what's exciting is all these things that have kind of grown out of the little branches of that tree, including like this, you know, I found you guys through the Kabuki Education Week. And for those listening, it was a week-long who's who speaking about all things, mostly around the world of powerlifting. But I mean, I didn't see one that didn't apply to another sport, you know, one single education piece that didn't apply to another sport. So you guys are growing in that education piece. And also, right before I hit record, you guys are talking about you're trying to develop a new program, which is Kabuki Kabuki Recovery, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So what's that all about?
So basically what we're trying to do is to create a network of clinicians where, you know, we have this, you know, basically a Rolodex. I mean, I know that that's kind of an old school term, but, you know, basically having a Rolodex where we can, because we coach people all across the world. And so right now we're hoping with Kabuki Recovery, just starting smaller and starting, you know, just nationally. But it would be nice if, you know, I'm coaching someone, I don't know, in Ohio, right? And they flare up, something happens. And instead of them completely taking a break from their lifting or their coaching, how can we keep them in the game, right? Whether that's powerlifting, whatever sport it is, how can we keep them moving in the game without just being, you know, just taking a step back or having this debilitating injury where mentally it can be a horrible thing to disrupt their progress, but physically as well. And so how can we get the clinician involved where it doesn't completely remove the clients away from coaching and from what they love to do? But also, how can we communicate with the clinician? Right now, traditionally, if someone gets hurt, they'll just, you know, Google search or whatever, find a clinician, and they just go there. That clinician may not know their sport at all. They may not be used to teaching or treating patients who lift really heavy or do any sort of barbell sport. But their goal is to just get them out of pain, which is good. But oftentimes the problems that we run into is that clinician, you know, we have no idea what the plan of care is for that for our patient, and sometimes we even get the extreme of that clinician telling them that they shouldn't do anything anymore. They shouldn't lift, right?
Ever again.
Sometimes, yes. I actually have a new client coming in who actually was given to me by another clinician because their other doctor told them, you should never lift again. And so, you know, this chiropractor is saying, I actually disagree. And I think if you work with the right people, you can still progress. You can still load without the fear of injury or without.
I mean, I think everybody, not everybody, but most of the people listening, and if you don't feel this way, if you're a listener, you can find another podcast, but most of us feel like exercise is a huge part of the recovery game. And if given the choice between exercise and no exercise, 99% of my listeners will go to exercise. I think my in-laws listen to the podcast and they're really undecided right now, but 99% of people go for exercise. And then if you said, all right, would you rather have high intensity exercise, whether it's, you know, volume, weight, and repetitions, whatever, or low intensity, I think everybody would drift towards high intensity with a little asterisk next to it, as long as that's in a safe manner. Like, we all agree on that.
Right.
But it sounds like what you guys as coaches are, if I gave you a magic wand, you would say, I would love to have a bunch of gling chiros and PTs that gling talk to me and gling help my clients like actually keep lifting and push. like essentially allowing them to push as hard as they want, as long as we don't regress in our injury. Right. So literally if somebody could squat with the, 400 pounds on their back and that did not bother their back, like do it. And let's just be safe to not flare things up. What's interesting is what I would love to cover on this is, how does that fall apart for you guys? I mean, sure, you do get these backwards people and like this old school mentality of, take 4 to 6 weeks off and, Advil and hope for the best. Like not, I started the podcast because I want to talk to interesting people, but my personal experience in college, I jacked up my back at the lowest point in a Olympic squat. So super low squat, 492 pounds on my back. And I felt this little click and I could rack the weight. I stood up, racked it. And like 3 hours later, I could not move, like could not get out of a chair, couldn't do anything. And what I think happened, I think I tore my annular fibers. I think disc material started migrating out over 2 hours. And when it had migrated all the way out, couldn't move. And I spent the next 30 days being the most consistent ice bather in my training room, the most consistent E-stimmer in my training, the most consistent ultrasounder in I was showing up on time. I was showing up twice a day when I could. And at the end of 30 days, I had no pain. And I had absolutely zero thought that I could go back under a bar with anything, with 135 pounds, like nothing. And I was just like, this can't be it. Like I've been as good as you could be. This cannot be what we're looking at. Anyways, so I'm getting all emotional because that just drove me nuts. And that's what drove me to be a chiropractor is like, you got to do more. Like this rub and ice and shit. It's like, it's for the birds, man.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And that's always the hard part. Even when we do have athletes who flare up or for whatever reason, they try to already start backpedaling or they already start backing away saying, I need to take a month off because something is flaring up. And, we're always trying to encourage our athletes that it's not an all or nothing approach and that, coaches, clinicians, we can all be plugged in to their journey depending on where they're at. We want to meet them with where they're at and then being able to adapt and mold the program to just progress from there. So rather than just saying, okay, something bothered you, we must stop. We better stop. It must be bad.
Right.
So we want to stay away from progressing as much as possible.
We don't need to treat this training as like a light switch, right? It's either turned on or it's off. It's like, no, there are times where we're training at 100% and other times 84% is as good as we can do today, but we'll take it. I want to have that day.
And not to take too much of a side road, but before we really get into the nuts and bolts of, communication and other things, I think it's really important. I always try to remind myself the goal of the athlete, and that can go one of two ways. In one of our seminars, we talk, pain science. And one of the problems is if you have somebody who's maybe on the lighter side of training, and especially if their family's like, that weightlifting you're going to do is bad for you, and you're going to hurt yourself. And then of course they have a little tweak and they go to a doctor who doesn't, know necessarily whether it's ER, family doc, chiropractor, whatever it is. And they say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Your back is never going to be the same, XYZ. And it's that you shouldn't, you're hurt, you're injured, you're broke, that mentality. That can crush an athlete. On the flip side, you get guys like me, I'm just a knucklehead. I hurt myself. I'm like, how quick can I pick up massive amounts of weight? Like, I'm going to listen to my team, but I'm also going to push faster. I'm not quite as bad as Duffin is, but I'm more on that other end of the spectrum. So if I go in and somebody says, hey, you can't do X, Y, Z, you shouldn't do this. Well, now I'm not even going to listen to you and we're not talking anymore. So we have to be aware of where the athlete is on that spectrum because we can do a lot to affect either negatively. Well, I guess they're both negative examples. One is, oh gosh, I can't do that anymore. I got to tell my coach that I'm not allowed to lift and I have to quit the sport. And the other side is, well, now I'm not listening to this person at all because they have no idea my mentality. I know it's not safe for my back, but I'm, 4 weeks out from a world level competition and I'm going to show up and do something. So,
yeah, I think it takes a lot. I don't know about you guys as coaches, but it took me a lot of years to realize that I need to clearly identify the goal of the patient on day one. Because like Kyle, you saying, I want to get rid of my back pain is the same thing that your mother might tell me, right? But you if I don't clearly identify that goal, which is really, I want to get rid of my back pain so I can compete in this thing that's in 6 weeks, and I'm really nervous, and there's some fear inside of me that I won't be able to compete, and the next time this will come around is a year or 2 years. I worked with a guy who's on the Ryder Cup in golf. That doesn't come around often. It's 4 years if you get selected for the team, and it's like, whoa, that's heavy duty odds, and there are times in your life, like whether you're going to age up in powerlifting or, in Ironman triathlons is the same thing. Like if you want to win the race before you age up, like, hey, that window is closing quickly. Yep. So I think identifying that is so important, and identifying it in what is the context they're talking about it. Again, like getting out of pain and getting out of pain for the competition are very different.
Yeah, that's a good note that you highlight, identifying the context that they're saying it in, because if we're in a lot of pain, we can just say, man, this is killing me. I don't want to hurt. But finding out those more prodding questions of why, what context, that's a really key point, I think, that you highlighted.
Yeah. Because the other thing is, like, for competitive people, it's like, hey, we can get you that point with duct tape and zip ties and hold you together, and you might still win, but you may, completely destroy your back. They'll be like, okay, like that's not even a decision. I mean, I've talked to NFL players, and they're like, I had an NFL player, 7 joint replacement surgeries. And I said, would you ever trade it for anything? He's like, never. It's like, okay. Yeah. It's an interesting perspective. Anyway, so you guys are wishing you had a network or Rolodex of, and for those kids that are listening here, Rolodex was before phones had contact lists. It was a paper file that we'd flip in a circle.
Sorry.
No, my dad was an attorney. I can picture his on his desk,
Yeah.
Yeah. And they actually would upgrade. You want the 100 card one, and then it's like, ooh, this is a 250 card one. Ooh, Anyways, and I worked for him for like a day, putting the business card inside of the Rolodex card. It had like a little cutouts, and you would kind of weave it in there.
Yep.
Anyways, super exciting stuff. But you guys wish you had a network of people where you could call and say, hey, I have this athlete in Columbus, Ohio, who is telling me he tweaked his back at the gym. And I guess one of the limitations is you guys can't be there with him. So you're with that athlete, you're going off their report of it, right?
Right. And so one thing that we're working on right now is a way to communicate. We need to find a common language. I think that's probably one of the hardest barriers to break through right now. Because right now the only form of communication that we're getting is through the client, through the patient. If it's just a he said, she said sort of communication, what the clinician may tell the client or patient may be different once it gets to us, or what we say might be different by the time it gets to you, right?
Yeah.
So,
especially if they're a week in between. They check in with us on a Thursday. Next Wednesday, they see their physical therapy, their chiropractic appointment, and it's their interpretation of what we said, because it's not going direct from professional to professional.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is, like, I don't tell my patients I give them a explained version, which is like when you guys are selling equipment, you don't tell us like, well, the steel starts out as this level of blah, 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 and then they add 4% of chromium to it because it, resists. Like, it's like, hey, here's the bar. It's made out of our best performing steel. It's like, that's been translated a lot on purpose, like so that they can understand it, because it's much more important to me that my patient understand what's going on than know the exact name of the thing that's going on, but it does bring up a good point. So talking professional to professional, and then, so let's say that we get to this point. I mean, tell me about the dream here. So we get to this point where we're communicating. What happens then? What do you guys want to occur there? And for my listeners, I'm asking these questions because it's always great to get the perspective from other people involved, because Kabuki, as it grows, if they say if you have 50 clients in an area and they say any of them say they're hurt, it'd be great if you say, there's one person in Dubuque, Iowa that I trust. And it's, Sherry Johnson. She's an LMT, but blah, 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 blah. Or there's one chiro in Columbus, Ohio that I trust.
Yep.
That wouldn't be bad.
One avenue through Kabuki Recovery that we're also trying to build is creating a course where if you want to be a part of Kabuki Recovery, if we can all take the same courses, then we at least know that there's that common language that we can build off of. The goal isn't necessarily for us to receive your guys' evaluation note or your daily notes, right? We don't necessarily need that information. That's.
And then you'll turn into an insurance company and start
right, exactly.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
And vice versa. We don't necessarily want it to be, us sending you our programs and expecting you to just interpret the program.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's how can we create just the movement priorities is the best name, the best term that I can give it. What are the movement priorities from a clinician standpoint and from a coaching standpoint that we need to focus on in order to get this patient or client moving forward? I don't need to necessarily know, the level of the cervical spine and the side and all of those things.
Yeah.
But if you told me, for example, all right, well, this patient has neck pain, and usually I already know that they do because I'm already asking a clinician to help us out, right?
Right.
So, and the movement priority, therefore, is thoracic mobility or improving breathing and bracing mechanics. Those type of common words would be a great way to just make sure that we're all on the same page, essentially. Even something that I think sets Kabuki apart is just our priority on different movement foundations. We are assessing breathing mechanics and bracing mechanics and things that are happening at the foot with every single one of our clients, and we want to make sure that is that's set. That they understand, that the client knows why we focus so much on breathing. Yeah, they're expecting to come in and lift heavy weight, and then all of a sudden we're telling them, well, you have to lay on your back and learn how to use your diaphragm. A lot of times they're just like, what? And even me coming from a clinical side, I know a lot of clinicians that teach breathing and bracing differently than I do, and you add load to that, and it completely changes everything. So it's we want to be able to, it's trust, right? I want the clinician to be able to trust me, knowing that if you say, hey, their movement or their breathing patterns are disrupting their ability to create intra-abdominal pressure and bracing, or they have flexion tolerance, and you tell me, we want the clinicians to be able to trust the coaches that we know what you're talking about without necessarily going on the ins and outs of what the diagnosis is, or I don't necessarily have to.
I don't know what any of my other listeners are thinking right now, but I got to say, take this as the spirit which is intended. I'm in love with both of you. I mean, if you're thinking about IAP and flexion intolerance as strength coaches for powerlifting, like we can we can hold arms and gallop through flowering fields together, because like we are so close to. I mean, just using, like you're right. The same language goes so far in understanding, like, hey, for whatever reason, this person's spine just doesn't like flexion in their lumbar spine. Do whatever you want. Like Kyle's as LMT, like, hey, you have your tricks for that. I'm a chiropractor. I want to adjust it, adjust them for that. Like, but we can all agree that in training, that's an area we need to keep a careful eye on, right?
Yeah, and that's where this clear communication comes. But it has to be with the same verbiage. That's why one thing we're talking about from day one is the same verbiage. Yeah. We might have it, but there's and I understand some of the levels of distrust, just with the amount of educational experience. Right now, there can be bad practitioners and bad coaches on both sides. I'll stay completely neutral in the middle. Like, we're not going to point fingers, but it's easy to see. We're like, well,
you can go ahead and point fingers because that's good for ratings on a podcast.
But if you have, somebody that can take a weekend course and become a trainer, somebody with years and years of schooling, it's going to be really hard for them, no matter how knowledgeable this person is, it's going to be hard for them to put trust in that person. Now, if they're talking the same talk and the same lingo right away, we're like, oh, wow, this young trainer knows their stuff. This is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And then if we can make goals that are the same and have some professional boundaries where this person's going to trust this aspect and this person's going to trust this aspect, we're not stepping into the other's toes because we know what our job is. But back to what you said, we know what the client's goals are within the parameters of what the client is saying. Then we can really work together as a unit. Because right now, as we all know, there's too much of either silence or, pointing fingers and not working together as a unit.
Right. Which, I'll tell you, like the most successful clients I can think of the 5 most successful clients that financially were absolute home runs, all had one thing in common. On the front end, we did a meeting. So they're all golfers. We did a meeting with me as the chiro, their swing coach, them as the athlete, their club fitter, or, whoever was getting them fit for clubs and balls and equipment and everything. And then usually their strength coach, and sometimes even for a couple of them, massage therapists, if they were getting massage once a week. And I mean, I can remember we had 5 people around in a round table. And after that, for those listening that are like, I don't know if I can coordinate that. Once that person feels like they're number one and they're looking at everybody going, God, every single person is here committed to getting me better, the barrier to asking for payment drops off the face of the earth. I mean, if they have the money, they're going to spend it because they're like, this is what I want. I mean, you take Chris, for example, that dude has 86 people on his team, but he got 86 faces facing him. And if he also has the money, it's like, hey, this is what I want. Okay. I think that you need, 2.5 massages every month. Cool. Book it. Regardless of cost, you need this exact protein shake. Cool. Make it. I don't care what the supplier is. It's like, I don't need a coupon at the nutrition center. And I think that a lot of times young clinicians think that they're the hot one and that they're the only one, but the sense of that room of when you're all about performance, it's so incredible for business. And also it makes everybody on that team feel great.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever had a client tell me that they didn't want to go to a clinician when I recommended it, because oftentimes we actually get clients coming to us saying that, I need to get out of pain, when we know that that's not necessarily our scope of practice, right? So, but we know that we can probably, modify their exercises or their programs, and that might help them get out of pain from an indirect standpoint. But sometimes we know that it needs to be a clinician that is addressing their issues. And when I think that there's this fear of saying, I don't know the answer.
100%.
And I actually love being able to tell my clients, I'm going to be honest with you, that's either out of my scope or I don't know that answer. But guess what? I have someone for you. And it's just like that. They're like, oh, great, perfect. And all of a sudden they have this team and they feel that trust. They feel that support. And I think that's important, not just from, an athlete who may not have team, but especially someone who has had multiple bad experiences, has tried multiple different ways of training, but no matter what, they always get beat up, or they maybe they're seeing a clinician every single week for the past, I don't know, few months, or, they're seeing the same, going in for their monthly checkup, and then yet they still flare up. They still have the same chronic issues, but it's refreshing, I think, to the client when here we are saying, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to create a team of people who will all help you do so.
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody who performs at a high level, NBA, NFL, NHL, they all develop that along the way. They don't come to it as hey, this is a stupid idea, I'm going to do this. It just kind of develops, and you realize in the end they have a whole team that needs to work together. And so it just tells you that many hits of that program make the most sense. So I got a question for you guys. I want you to mull on this. I'm going to do my little live read real quick, but here's the question. What do you do? How do you balance? I'll ask it this way. How do you balance staying in your lane and also helping your client when you realize that the other side is not performing to your desires? I'm trying to be kind on how I say that. So let me do my live read real quick, and we'll cover this when I get back. So we're talking about communication today. Communication is the most important thing you do with your clients, whether it's for marketing purposes, for patient care, to give them a wow experience, whatever it is. Communicating is so tough. And so many people communicate through email, which unfortunately is just wrought with problems. Most people have multiple email addresses. They get hundreds of emails a day and don't have time to look through everything. Now, how do most people communicate now? It's through text messaging. So use text messaging to communicate with your patients and your clients in your gym and your clinic. And the best tool for that is Clinic Gym Connect. Check out clinicgymconnect.com and you can see options for communicating the way that your clients do, which is through text messaging. Our app allows you to assign conversations to different people on the team. So if you want to, if a client asks a question and you want them to follow up with the trainer, you can assign that conversation to the trainer, but the customer's number that they're contacting from stays exactly the same. So it allows us to be both a business and a wonderful communicator. So if you're interested in that and so many more features, including automation, phone handling, and sending out text messages with pictures for their birthday to celebrate that little day in their life, check out clinicgymconnect.com. Again, that's clinicgymconnect.com. All right, now let's get back to it. So there you are. You want to stay in your lane because you are a consummate professional, and you look to the other lane and there's a beat up piece of shit, broken down car driving next to you with a tire that's about to fall off. And you're saying, what do I do here? So how do you guys balance that?
Well, I definitely think it's higher on my radar because I have a license, but right now I am just doing coaching full time. Yeah. And so, I always, my clinician switch never turns off, right? So I always have that license hanging over my head. So I'm a little bit more sensitive to.
And in one sense, it's a huge advantage, right? Like it is a huge advantage because I've seen that at its worst, or I've seen that in a different format, or I've seen x-rays of what that looks like deep inside that joint. I know what that is.
Yeah. So it's great because I have that in the back of my mind, but I have to be careful with how I address something, because again, it's all about staying in our lanes and being able to refer out when needed. But part of the intake process that we get with, so all of our clients, they'll sign up for coaching and they have to fill out an intake form. And one of those boxes are movement limitations. And so right off the bat, before we even talk to the client, we already are reading what their movement limitations are, what their goals are. A lot of it, if they have a laundry list of movement limitations, I want to ask, was it formally diagnosed? Are you seeing someone currently? What are you doing to manage that? And, depending on their answer, so if they haven't seen anyone and it's more self-diagnosed, I am going to ask them, how are you managing it? And are you open to seeing someone? Because first we want to make sure that we're eliminating any red flags that are happening. And if, maybe it's just something like, once in a while, if I bench too heavy, I'm going to get some shoulder discomfort. And it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't limit my daily life. It just comes and goes, and they just want to work to avoid that. I may not be so quick to refer out. And my goal as a coach is to try to see what modifications I can make in their technique first, to see if I can fix something in the movement itself through, external cues, and then also, programming different accessory exercises to address those weak links, then, referral isn't necessarily top priority. But if modifying doesn't work, and if their issues are bothering them even before they get into the gym, and it's it's affecting their daily life, I definitely, and they're already not working with anyone, I want to make sure to get them in front of a clinician to at least have some formal evaluation, and again, making sure that there are no red flags that are going to further mess them up, right?
Yeah. So it's I think one of the things it sounds like you've done along the way, Cass, you put aside your ego and just said, number one, let the client direct what's going on. Number two, what resources can I provide? Not having to be you, right? You're just saying what resources, whether it's just a contact or a method or something, and then lastly, like, hey, what are the things within my wheelhouse that I can clearly improve?
On the other side of that spectrum too, we always want to try to limit regressions as much as possible. And sometimes I think that we get some clients who are just wanting to do like a ton of bird dogs, right? They're like, what movement I'm hiring you guys because I really need to do I feel like I need to do movement prep. I need better drills to do to fix this one. Really,
I love those clients for the fact, like I have this one client and he will tell me like, I did, 45 minutes of foam rolling, then I did all my movement prep exercises, and then I got in the spa Then I got out, did a 42-minute yoga routine, and then I did some Pilates work, and then I went to play golf. And my back hurt, so I think I might have to do more Pilates. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I wish I had your level of commitment, my man. Like, you are investing 3 hours to get ready to go hit a little white ball. Like, I wish I had your drive in life. Like,
and that was our presentation in Kabuki Education Week is, I think a lot of people read the title thinking that it was going to be, we're going to be using a lot of tools before movement prep, but the actual presentation was us talking about how we want people to get to their sport-specific task as soon as possible. And there's a role, a time and place for instrument-assisted self-tissue mobilization, or there's a role for foam rolling. There's a time and place for all of that. But the goal is, remember why you stepped foot in the gym to begin with, right? And
yeah.
It wasn't to foam roll for 45 minutes.
And as a gym owner at one point myself, and Kyle, I'm sure you've heard this, like, you get a lot of people when you do these perfect movement prep things and blah, 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 and they have so many exercises, and they're like 47 minutes into a 60-minute session going, hey, are we going to lift today? Like, it's hard to ask them for money at that point, because they're like, I think we might be disjointed here. Like, I'm doing my 40 second set of bird dogs and this rolling exercise, and I haven't yet actually lifted a dumbbell or kettlebell. And I came
back to the client's goals and how they articulate those. I had that problem in the gym a lot when I used to manage commercial fitness and trainers. You have some of those real techie trainers that want to fix everything before, okay, but your client was here to lose 50 pounds and they're not sweating yet. So it's going to be really hard to continue to keep them as a client. So back to your previous question, I'll take a little bit different spin on it, but it's kind of the same thing that Cassie said. Mine's a little bit different than the average coach because, I have a different schooling than a physical therapist, but I can put hands on people and I can make them do exercises. So
it's like 85% of the game right there.
Right. So I'm always looking at it from that tissue perspective and the movement perspective. But if somebody is working with a clinician that's, maybe not getting the best results and the wheels are still falling off the bus, or the ones that I think are even harder is, somebody says, well, I've worked with, I've seen all these physical therapists, these clinicians before, and they told me I can't do X, Y, Z, but they hear what they're saying. I'm like, okay, but you've been in pain for 10 years. So what they told you is not helping. And then they're like, well, so I'm going to go see the surgeon. And that's where I like the hands-on approach. I'm like, okay, well, I hear you about your carpal tunnel and your nerve pain. Let's talk about this logically first. Let me touch you in a couple spots and see if we can reduce pain, inflammation, all stuff goes away. Why are you going to go get cut? Right? I'm going to propose the question back to them by showing them a different way. But if they're dead set on it, I go back to being super confident and change what I can. Like, even if I disagree, I again have to remember, it's back to one of those first points I made. If their chiropractor is their neighbor and their best friend that they go golfing with, for me to tell them they're wrong and they don't know what they're talking about, even if that's true what I believe, I could lose that client because I don't know their belief of their doctor. And again, if it's not clearly communicated, I'm not sure what they're actually saying. So worst case scenario, I'll suggest maybe a second opinion on something. And the nice thing about the team here, we can do that. Cassie can be working with one of her clients and maybe it's just there's something off. She can pull me into the office and get another coach's perspective. That's the ultimate goal with Kabuki Recovery is, hey, I know you've been with this person for a long time, but you're not quite getting the results you want. Let's just go get a second opinion over here. And during the meantime, as a coach, I'm going to control the things that I can. I'm going to be confident in my job and do everything I can to help build that client out of pain.
I always want to try to have the client feel like they're in control. Right? So, for example, if let's say I'm going to choose a very typical, I'm just gonna do an example here. Let's say I tell them to go get a second opinion on a diagnosis for knee pain, and then suddenly they come back saying, well, my clinician told me to make sure I, squat with my chest up and I don't let my knees travel over my toes, and they told me not to squat with the bar on my back. I may give it a chance and say, okay, well, let's modify some things. And if things aren't getting better, rather than me telling them things aren't getting better, I want to ask the client, well, how do you feel about this? Like, how do you feel when you leave the gym, or when you leave the physical therapist or the chiropractor's office? how do you feel about it? Do you feel better? And if they don't, I'm going to let them analyze that answer, right? I'm not going to tell them you need to do something different. I'm just going to let them guide that thought process. And, from there, I'll suggest, well, we do have these clinicians over here who I know are used to working with barbell athletes. They may have a little bit a different perspective to treat your issue. And then if they're open and willing, then great. And I want to be able to plug in that clinician and we keep moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the easiest things as a clinician sometimes is like, what's going on? Oh, your, knee hurts. What have you tried? How'd that work? And usually it's a long list of didn't work. And I'm just, I'll kind of sit on it for about 3 seconds and go, so we can agree we're not going to do more of that. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that doesn't work. And I always think like, this is the first time you're realizing that, but you're realizing that, and it's
exactly
perfect. Yeah.
People
I mean,
on that with their own thoughts on their own pain. We get caught up in the minutia, and until somebody asks them a crystal clear question, they're like, wait, wow, I haven't thought about that for 10 years. I kept beating my head against the wall and my forehead's still sore. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of those things. I'm sure that those people could look at some point of our lives and find somewhere where they're like, why are you still doing this? I'm like, okay, you're right. Like, I don't know. I don't know why I don't just tell my wife every day, hey, here's what I'm going to do today, because that would reduce the arguments probably at the end of every day of how come you didn't tell me what you did today? All right, tomorrow will be the day.
Right.
But one of the reasons I asked this question about staying in your lane is I think that there are also, if I can offer a counter idea, there are also us clinicians that want to integrate exercise, and we want our clients truly to be active and the best part about being a clinician, I think, is like, if you say I have this goal of competing in this powerlifting event, I want to get a text from you 6 months later, dude, you won't believe it. I placed first, like that's rewarding. I'm being part of that. What sucks is seeing that person at the store and go, hey man, what about that powerlifting event? I just couldn't do it because I could never get my back to feel better, And one of the things I think that's frustrating with us is what I call the ping pong game, where somebody comes in and says, whatever, I have, low back pain. Okay. We do everything we can and we send them to a trainer, strength coach, whoever, and we don't see them for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then they come back and they go, yeah, my back pain's back. Like, okay. And then they go back we send them back to the trainer and they ping pong back and forth until somebody burns out. Either the strength coach thinks I'm a complete idiot or but most likely what happens is the client is like, I'm not paying either one of you guys anymore. Like, this is a good way to go broke and I'm not getting anything I want, And so in those cases, a lot of times I want to go like, hey, I'll take over the training, or I will offer some training. I'm a strength coach. Like, I did it in college and, I've been paid for it, but I wouldn't say I'm the greatest strength coach. I'm certainly not at like your guys' level, but if I were to give myself a grade, I'm a C-. But the person I'm referring to is a D. So it's like, what do you do in those situations where you're like, I could do this better and I want to do it better and it's fun, but I don't want to step outside my lane, just like I don't want you guys going, hey, let me correct your diagnosis there. It's like, yeah. So it's tough, I think, for both ways, but that's one of the reasons I do love your idea of unifying the language. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with like the SFMA, the Selective Functional Movement Assessment?
Mm-hmm.
One of the greatest things I think about that is, hell, half the first morning is all like, listen, you can call it whatever you want, but we agree that it's a tissue problem, right? It's not a joint problem. Or we agree this is a joint problem. Agreed? Like, you can call it whatever you can call it fascial stretching, neuromobilization. You can call it trigger points, whatever. But we just know like this is not in the joint. It's like, yeah, okay, we can agree to that. Cool. Then do your magic that and I'm going to do my magic that I think's better and whatever. We're going to come to roughly the same result.
Goes back to that common goal, right?
All right, Kyle, I hear you. Yes, the common goal. Let the client drive it. No, but I think it's interesting that you bring that up. Like, all these things do come back to that single source of, are we super clear on what the client wants? And I would say that many times as a clinician, I'm sure you guys have had this as a coach, like you start drifting away to what you want for the client, rather than what they truly said they want.
Well, especially as young coaches, I know I was definitely guilty of that. And I see it a lot with younger coaches. They have their vision and then they just take it and run with it, and they're not checking back in. They're not making sure that they're on track for that, especially because plans change, right? People that have a plan that's written in stone and they're going to do this over a year, they're going to take them from this point to this point. But then life happened, right? They missed some workouts, the family was sick, and these times they were locked down and didn't have access to gym equipment. The plan has to change. And if we don't remember that, then we're just sticking with this old plan. And especially when we're talking injuries, that's a recipe for disaster because we didn't modify to the times, the demands, the stresses of life, the other changes that came into play.
Yeah.
I'm always educating clients just how a good program needs to be flexible. It needs to meet you where you're at. And the more you try to stick to a cookie cutter plan, the easier it is going to be to fail because there's no room, there's no wiggle room. And so I think that
I have a friend.
It's not a black and white answer either.
Yeah.
And so, plugging and playing, right? I think that a lot of people don't realize that even when it comes to treatment, whether you're in a treatment room or you're out on the gym floor, we're not trying to sit there and say, yes, I know the answer. This is going to work. And that's what's going to happen. This is going to be the outcome. No, realistically, it's okay. So here's the situation. Let's assess, right? Address it, reassess. It's a constant assessment process. And so I love that is what the clinical side has taught me on things, right? Yeah. So you always have to have a test. And so for our presentation in Kabuki Education Week, I think I mentioned something how let the bar or the whatever, let's say squat, bench, and deadlift is their lift. Let the bar be that test, right? Get under the bar as soon as possible and self-assess. Like, oh, okay, my thoracic spine is feeling tight today. Maybe I should go do something about that. Instead of just, I'm going to roll out for 20 minutes because I know that thoracic mobility is a good thing. I don't really know if it applies to me, but I'm just going to try it. Right? And so always trying to just have that constant self-assessment and then also having the coach's lens of assessing. And we just have to plug and play and just see what we can modify, what works, what doesn't, and understand that it's not going to be the same throughout your entire spectrum, your entire journey of coaching, right? What worked 5 years ago may not work now, right? What worked 3 weeks ago might not work now. And it's, always trying to just see what works and
yeah, I think I have a friend that owns a restaurant and he's an amazing chef. And, he one time told me, and I was struck when you were saying this, he said, like, he'll plan a menu and then he said, then the produce will come in and I'll realize, well, we can't do watermelon salad because those watermelons are just horrible, and he has these great menu items, but he has to also adapt to what's in season, what's available, and even if it's like, hey, that I can get you whatever bib lettuce, but it's not the best you've ever seen. He has to adapt. And I think you bring up a good point. He has to do that every night. Literally every night he gets a shipment of produce, he's reassessing. And sometimes we get lazy with our patients, and it's so funny when you're saying like you assess. It's so funny when I don't know if you guys play this game. Sometimes you'll see that person, you'll bet on what it is. Like, oh, I know what this is. This is a thoracic spine issue. And then you do the assessment like, all right, wasn't expecting that. Your T-spine's perfectly clear. Damn it. Yeah. Now I actually have to think. But it also is kind of an adventure in doing that as well.
I remember as a student, as a clinician, trying to have a plan before the patient comes in. And then you hear they're subjective. And then you don't ever look at that plan again. You're like, oh, I had this plan. Then I heard what they had to say for the day. And then I watched them move. That plan
went to the trash can.
Yeah, I don't even know what was on that plan. And
well, thank God you do that, because some people just stick to the plan even in the face of the conflicting information. So
I see that a lot again in the strength coaching world. And I think some of that can be due to lack of education or, they're so set in their ways. I see that a lot with younger strength coaches that haven't experienced a lot. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have our skill set and specialize, because I think we should, but coaches that really go out and learn and utilize different tools, it would be like, for us, we have the Duffalo bar, we have the transformer bar, for a very basic example. A lot of people just want to squat with a straight bar on their back. And we're like, wait, we have a toolbox The squat's not bad. The tool you're using is wrong. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. But so many people, if all they've ever used is a straight bar in this random example, they're just going to beat their client over the head with a straight bar instead of simply using the same pattern, but a different tool for that pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great trainer. I don't know if you guys ever follow Ben Bruno on Instagram, but super smart trainer and also incredibly funny, which is always a great combo. And he loves landmine presses and landmine exercises, right? But he says the problem is, especially he works with, it's heartbreaking. He works with a lot of females in Hollywood, like these incredibly good-looking women. But one thing about them is they have smaller hands, and so that huge, round pipe at the end of a barbell, he's like, it's too hard for him. So he has a tool that slides on and necks it down to an easier to grip thing. But just like looking at that end user and saying, what do I need to do here to maybe make the tool a little bit easier? We're not talking about crazy changes here, but just a little bit easier. Or like, hey, this bar's been straight. Why is it straight? I don't know. Just that's how they've always been.
Yep.
What if we put a little camber in it? I don't know. Let's try it. And it's like,
exactly.
Yeah. It's like, how come it takes this long to figure these things out? Like, how come that bar wasn't bent, like whatever, 70 years ago with the strongman and,
right.
The old, what's his name? Oh man, what's that book? Oh God. Trying to remember the Mighty Inch or whatever. The Mighty Atom. I can't remember that. It's a old strength book. Like you get through Iron Mind or something. Anyways, dusting off some old things like in my Rolodex of ideas. So, well, guys, we're up against the clock, and this has been awesome. I feel like we could keep going down this path, but let's do this. For those clinicians listening, I'm going to keep this specific. I always ask for follow-up, but for those clinicians listening that truly are like, hey, I want to be the person, or I want to be a great resource to you guys as Kabuki, to you guys who are coaching, virtually coaching clients all around the world, how can they kind of get involved, or what's the first step they should do, and what should they definitely check out?
Well, it's a great time to jump in because all of the work that Cass is putting in behind the scenes to make this happen. It's something that Duffin really wants to have happen too, Chris, in long-term vision. So it's easy to get a hold of us, but I just wanted to throw that out there. It's a great time. As things roll out, we'll be fine-tuning and tweaking things. So no better time than now.
So you're the Don King to Cass here. You're the promoter, huh? You're like, hey.
Right now, yes.
Yeah, Cass is doing the
you can find
work
me,
over here.
Yeah, email me at Cassandra at kabukistrength.com, Cassandra. And then I can communicate with you more on what we're looking for.
And as a rough roadmap, it looks like there will be education, like we talked about, break down those language barriers. And then there'll be a network of, hey, we have this person who's got these licenses in this area. We want you to go to them. And then probably some communication from coaches along the way.
Yeah.
Always great time to get in too when, we're building that network, be the first people on that network. Yeah. So my email is super simple. It's kyle@kabukistrength.com. But you can always find both of us on the website if you click through and see the coaches. Multiple ways to contact us.
Yeah. And I would hate to end this with, if you haven't heard of Kabuki Strength, and if you're interested at all in strength training or whatever, I think some of the tools you guys have come up with, like I'll say the trap bar, the Duffalo bar, they're just a great new method of thinking pragmatically about lifting. Like I could lift so much more if only we're on trap bar. I could probably get another set if I could just load this thing faster. That's a big thing. Or I wish I have small. So for me, I always hated when we worked with golfers, like these collegiate female golfers. They're usually tiny. They're 5'4". They look like they're one of those like squirrel suit wings when they're on a normal trap bar. The handles are just so wide, and you're like, oh man, I wish there was they could take a more narrow approach. And it's like, yeah, we solved that too, and it's just awesome.
Yeah, well, I'm 4'11", and so if you look at our website, they actually use me and Chris to compare. That look, nice. Here's someone who's 4'11", 100 pounds, and she's lifting using the same implement as someone like Chris Duffin, and we're going to make it work.
Same implement, different handle, different graphic, easy stuff.
But it makes sense if you're truly listening to your end client and you truly are running into these problems. Like the only downside of these tools is I just sit there and I think, why the hell did it take this long? Why did it take till 18 to develop these? So,
well, I don't know. Chris threw it out there. Thanks for, the confidence and the plug on that. But really, I'm a pretty confident guy, but I try not to be too, braggadocious with our company. But there's really no other company out there who's growing at the rate we are with education, specialty equipment, and coaching. And one of the reasons why is because, again, we're looking at it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Why are we we're not trying to just sell straight bars. There's plenty of people selling a regular barbell and can compete on better bar, less bar, better price, all that. How are we going to help the people move? Because there's way more people that lift weights. We're talking golfers, fighters, all kinds of different athletes. There's really not that many people that actually powerlift compared to all the other sports. So if we can help these people, now we're also doing better as coaches. But then again, we're not sending them to you as beat up. They're not as broken. So.
Yeah, I love it. All right, guys. Well, this has been awesome. I really appreciate the time. Once again, Kyle Young and Cassandra Strunk down at Kabuki Strength. Email them, check out their website. I'm really excited about what the next 5 years hold too, because launching this recovery program in line with all this other education and the tools to do it it's the new human body space race. This is super cool. So
good game changer. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys for the time. And like I always say, go out there, maximize your license, and live the life you dream of. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Thanks so much for checking out these videos. I hope they're useful. We'll cover things like rehab, exercise, business model, progressions, layout, everything else that helps you build a clinic. So if you're interested, you can click here, there, here, or anywhere to get more videos just like this. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you soon.